What's up?
Well, we're here. Finally, after... it's January when we last did this.
I'm surprised. I thought it was like before that. I didn't realize it was that recent. I realize, look, it's July 6th. I get that when we're recording this. But I really thought it was like October. Somebody had mentioned something like that, and I was like, I felt about right. But all right, January. So it's been a minute. And I suppose folks want to know more details. Like, we were talking about this.
What is the state of the podcast? Is it another 6 months before the next episode?
I hope not. No, I've missed this. And that isn't something that's been the case for a very long time. And no, I'm not 100% sure on how often. I definitely do not want to say like it'll be weekly, because no, it won't be weekly. But fortnightly, I think that's reasonable. So every couple of weeks. The reason I haven't done the podcast is I haven't wanted to. And it's not driven on a monetary basis. There are some very probably negative folks out there would be like, oh, it's not YouTube, so it's not money. You got to realize, like, the channel's not that big. Like, YouTube's not making that much money. There are clearly more YouTube viewers than there are podcast listeners, so the audience is bigger in that regard. But it's not a monetary thing. It's what kind of content do I want to make thing. And it hasn't been the podcast, to be honest with you. It hasn't been fun. It wasn't enjoyable.
I always felt as well that part of the problem was the feedback, because when we're doing the streams, I mean, you've got the live audience and the peanut gallery, you've got a fairly rapid, little flurry of comments afterwards on YouTube. Well, with a podcast, on the other hand, you drop the podcast and it's kind of like crickets. You don't hear a thing.
Yeah, and I mean, there are ways to get rough numbers on your number of listens and type thing, but yeah, there's not that feedback, so it's just out there in the ether. And are people listening to it? Are they enjoying it? What kind of and there's not just like, are they listening, but the feedback, like, are you doing things talking about things that people want to hear? And whereas on the YouTube channel, they're like, oh, I really want to see this game. There's not really that kind of feedback loop. Like, you don't get that kind of information. So it comes down to passion and interest on the podcast.
And another factor as well is, I mean, the core of the Heavy Cardboard podcast has always been the in-depth game reviews, and they're not easy to do.
Well, I mean, you've been on a number of the deep dive reviews, right?
It's not just the planning for the podcast is more than people would think, getting through the whole agenda and everything, but also you got to play the game enough times. And have we come close? I mean, we got kind of close. We'll talk a little bit about Imperial Steam later on. We got sort of close to Imperial Steam to get enough plays in, but it's not easy to get enough plays in when you're saying to yourself, we need half a dozen level plays. I mean, I listen to good podcasts, and they'll say, oh, I've played it once, I've played it twice, okay, let's do the review. And I'm kind of thinking, no, I need to play more often than that before I really know a game enough to talk about it.
Not just that, but at least on a more than just the surface level, right? So a lot of the more recent, if you will, or what the podcast kind of morphed into was and it's kind of going to be what we're talking about tonight, is not real deep dives, but like kind of surface level, things we've actually enjoyed, games we've enjoyed, but not that really deep, really scouring into a game. And you can't do that unless you have more than a handful of plays. And it's really hard to get that amount of plays, because on a realistic note, let's talk about you and I on this. From a realistic standpoint, you and I get together 2 times a week.
Yep.
On a rare week, there will be a third, but realistically, 2 times a week. So let's just say we did that for the same game. You're talking, that's 3 weeks worth of our getting together. And that's completely omitting any kind of streams that we're going to do, unless maybe one of those, let's say, out of that. So 3 weeks of you and I getting together for one game, we're not going to stream the same game 5-6 times. Doesn't make sense. And so that balance is near impossible to keep up with. And for the podcast, what I foresee going forward is Martin's not the co-host. He is one of the co-hosts, I guess would be a good way to put it, or a group, a small group is the goal, to get a small group of folks together and rotate between it to where, hey, it keeps it fresh because it's not y'all's job, it's mine, but me talking by myself doesn't make for the most compelling listen. And with that said, trying to, I don't want any of y'all to burn out. And so trying to find that group of a handful, we're talking anywhere between 4 and 7 folks, because everybody out there who listens to the podcast, they want to get to know the hosts and they want to be able to get a feel for what your likes and dislikes are and where your biases are, because God knows we all have them. And so if you do too wide of a net, then that's not going to work. And so getting that's the goal, and then rotate that way. Hey, you hear Martin, but you're going to hear him once every, I don't know, 2-3 months, maybe something like that. And that seems doable, right?
Yep. I think so.
So that's kind of the idea. Now, are they all going to be deep dives? No, because for the reason we just discussed. Is it all going to be surface level? No, but it's going to be a mismatch of things as we want to do them. As we want to do them doesn't mean time frame wise, but I'm committing to a fortnightly podcast. But as far as the quality, or the not the quality, let's try that again, Greg. But the content of the podcast will be whatever it is we want it to be. It'll be board game related, but past that, I'm not going to make any commitments.
And I really liked you did a number of deep dives where you had your guest who really knew the game. I'm thinking that the Great Western, because I'm primarily a podcast listener. I came to Heavy Cardboard through the podcast. I hardly ever watch the YouTube streams when I'm not streaming myself, because it doesn't appeal to me. But the podcast I really like listening to, and that was always to me the heart of Heavy Cardboard. And I really like listening to them. And I really enjoyed those. So I definitely like that kind of thing. And also allows you to hit a number of older games, which people have been playing for years, and have therefore a lot of good things have got interesting things to say about them.
I mean, I'll be honest, you're kind of the thorn in my side about the podcast. And I mean that in an affectionate, good way. You're like, hey, right. So yeah. So if y'all enjoy the podcast, blame this guy. By the way, welcome to episode 160. I guess.
Oh yeah.
Hi. So
live from Wakefield.
There you go. So I'm your host, Edward Euler, and
I'm Martin Fowler.
Yes, for those that don't know, that Martin Fowler. All right, which I still find funny that people are like, "Oh my God, my work life and my hobby are combining." The Martin. So there's a new part of our group, new guy in our group, James, who I was like, yeah, when he came over and he became a part of the group, you were out and you were on vacation and stuff.
Right.
And he was like, oh, it's that Martin Fowler. And I'm like, see, to me, I didn't know who you were, because I'm not in that world, right? And I was just, I think I've told this story before. Before I moved out here to Boston, there was this guy, Martin Fowler, that started following me on Twitter. And I was like, and it was a patron. And I'm like, who? Oh, he has a blue check mark. Who's this? So I went and investigated, and I was like, oh, he has a wiki page. He's kind of a big deal. Okay. Wow. That's cool. So, but I just know you and Cindy as our friends, and we go have dinner, and just a goofy friend of mine that we like to play board games with.
Exactly.
And drink tea. There you go. All right. So
it is odd how our group here in Boston has really become the tea drinker cabal, hasn't it? I mean, Ken's really into tea, Shrey's really into tea. I tend to drink tea more. You drink tea. It's not a common thing amongst Americans, I've found.
It's not. Speaking of a British theme thing, Martin came over getting ready for the podcast, and I was like, I am so excited. I am legitimately jonesing. Yes, let's do this tonight. I was like, how about you?
I said, yeah, I'm ready for it.
And I was like, wow, really? That's That's the best you really. I thought there would be some more enthusiasm, like asking for thumbs, and I was, and then you
I'm
responded.
British. We don't get enthusiastic about things in Britain.
He's British.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's that. So anyway, what we did is we kind of picked a handful or two or three games that we've played since January that we've enjoyed. And we'll briefly go over some more brief than others. But why don't we we'll
And they will be first impressions because we haven't got the requisite amount of to do a full review. Otherwise, we'd do a full review. So,
although I will say this, a couple of these we probably could.
we're getting close on a couple of them.
Oh,
yes.
I know I could on a couple of these.
Right.
Like Oath. I mean, obviously we have been playing
Yes.
Oath a lot. I think we streamed 6 chapters or 6 games of it, and I have 2 other plays of it before that, so I have 8 plays of Oath under my belt. So I think that would be one, and that is, it's not a game that I want to play all the time, and it is very much a game that it helps having somewhat recent experience with because they are very asymmetric, not vast, the game vast, not that asymmetric, but
Right.
it's asymmetric enough, but it's simple enough mechanically to be like, oh yeah, no, I remember. And so playing this every month or 6 weeks like we've been doing has been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed our plays of it, and I feel pretty confident speaking for Alyssa, Shrey, Ken, and myself in our plays of Oath that I think we all agreed that our last play of it was probably the most enjoyable. It's the one that we enjoy, that we, not everybody, it was tight. It was, everybody had their chance at winning, and it was the type of game that I think Oath can be, and it was great. I really enjoyed it.
How are you enjoying its semi-campaign nature?
I actually really kind of dig it. Now, the campaign nature, the only aspect of that that's kind of that stays is the board state, right? So some of the locations remain, and you get to add in some new cards, take some random cards that you don't know. Some of those get removed, but you don't ever go through the whole deck anyways, so you don't know really what all's been added and what's been removed. But the board state is not static. It changes each game, but it's not a drastic change. Like, we're not talking like a legacy game in that regard. It's just a campaign. And if we were to restart with a random setup every time, I don't know that it would feel much different. So I'm kind of indifferent in that regards, but I do like the idea that we have our group that does that, and we have kind of a story that we've been telling through this. And the story is more or less in your head, like, oh, this ruthless leader, so-and-so, whether it's me or Ken or Alyssa or whoever. And it's been a lot of fun, but it's very much not a game that I want to play all the time. I can't ever see you really. I don't think that would be your cup of tea.
The thing that put me off with mainly was the campaign element, because I'm reluctant to get myself locked into a campaign. I guess it's also a feeling if I wanted to do a campaign game, I'd want to start D&D again. Because that was my big game throughout my sort of 20s, and I feel whenever people say campaign or even a long game, like when you did Twilight Imperium, I kind of think, well, if I'm going to spend 10 hours playing a game, I could do it for D&D. I'm not sure I could do it for anything else.
Well, I mean, it's a 2-hour game, Oath is. So it's not, right?
But it's, again, the campaign nature. That's the thing that makes me kind of feel that I don't want to commit to that. In the same, I like the fact that games start from a blank slate and reach a completion, and that's the main thing that's put me off.
I think that's a minor component. It's more or less the campaign nature. I would say, like I said, it's less about that. It's the continuation of a story, but the story is still. You have a finite amount of lands. One person's the chancellor. Somebody might be a citizen. The rest are exiles. But the game is still the same. So you could reset it each time and just play with the same group. You don't even have to play with the same group. But the thing is, if you don't play it, if you play it once every 4 or 5 months, it's going to feel too new every time. Like you're not going to retain that. So it's going to, that learning curve is not, you're not going to get past that step.
Right.
And so I would hesitate to say that it's really a campaign game. So I don't want to turn anybody off from it that way. But at the same, there are folks out there that really enjoy playing it like once a week with their group. No, absolutely not. I do not enjoy the game to that. Age of Steam, I don't want to play that often. All right. Over the long haul, every month or two, or, every few weeks type thing, I'm good with that. And that's arguably my number one game of all time.
Right.
So I might be a bit different like that. But yeah, Oath, been enjoying the hell out of it. Really enjoying it.
Good.
Yeah. So that's me on one of mine. Why don't we talk? You got a number of games. Let's talk TKR, Three Kingdoms Redux.
Ah, yes. So this was interesting. It's a game I've heard about a lot from you, saying it's one of your big favorites.
Yes.
And I was always very reluctant to play it because it has this one very annoying constraint. You can only play it with 3 players.
The end, hard stop.
And that's a big deal for me because if I'm going to get into a game, I'm going to want to play it with Cindy, just the two of us, so I can get familiar with the game. We can get familiar with the game, and then 1 or 2 people can join us. So we'd like a game that scales to at least 2 to 4. So a 3-player game is there's no way I'm ever going to buy a 3-player game, right? And then we sat down, myself, Ken, and younger Martin. You were watching us, as it were, and guiding us through. Played one game, and then we came on stream with Ken, myself, and you. And suffice to say, it's my latest purchase.
And it being a 3-player game, which doesn't fit for all the reasons you just said. So I'd say that's high praise.
Yeah, there are a number of elements about it that I really kind of pick out as I like. I mean, the first thing is it's just got this very interesting approach to worker placement, where, worker placement games, normally whoever goes first to the worker placement spot, they get to do that action. Here, your workers, called generals, have a number value, 1 to 5. And whoever's got the highest amount, and you can combine generals on a spot, then that player gets to do the action. So you've got a kind of a bidding mechanic going on, which is made a little bit more interesting by the fact that I say that each general's got a number. They've actually got 2 numbers, a military and a administrative number for the bidding. And the spots are either military or civil. So as a result, you're figuring out where you want to put your generals. Do you use your bigger number, smaller number? You've got all that bidding mechanic going on in there. And that's the first element, I think, that really takes it into an interesting place that most worker placement games don't.
And on top of that, it solves the 3-player problem that a lot of games have, which is if 2 people are getting into conflict, the third player just benefits because they're not in a conflict. And this has a perfect balance aspect of it to where you can only attack me from this side, and I can only attack you from this side, and I can attack this other person from that side, and then you two, and it just balances it really, really well. It very much is a Euro through and through that has some auction warfare, I guess you could.
I don't think of it as kind of like warfare. It actually makes me think most of viticulture, interestingly. Because viticulture is a production game, right? You plant grapes, you harvest grapes, you turn the grapes into wine, you fulfill contracts. In Three Kingdoms Redux, you recruit armies, you train armies, you equip them with weapons, and then you send them out to these worker placement spots, which are only shared with one of your opponents, which is the military fighting area. And the fight is really just a worker placement bid, like every other worker placement bid, except there's only going to be 2 of you involved. So in many ways, it's more of a production worker placement game than anything that I would think of as a military game, even though the setting is definitely along military lines.
I think that's fair. Yeah, all right. And I like the opaque scoring aspect of the game as well, to where somebody might be ahead in military, or somebody might be going up the Han Dynasty track or whatever to be able to get some bonus points and maybe trigger the end of the game. But the way the scoring works, there are so many... And it's not just a majority scoring. It's a, did you do better than one, both,
Right.
or neither of your opponents? Or did you tie one of your opponents based on these different things? And that the way that scoring works, it's, at least in my experience, impossible to be able to tell. I think you're winning, but I'm not sure. And I like that aspect, especially since there are multiple ways for the game to end, different triggers for the game to end. And so debating whether or not do I go ahead and try and end it now because I think I'm ahead, it's not always clear. And I like that, and it makes it more tense.
And speaking of the scoring, this is the second thing that really leaps out to me in terms of worker placement. I talked about the military production process. You put an army into the field. Once you've won the military thing, then your
Congrats.
army stays in the field with its general. So as a result, yes, you score victory points now for every turn, which is good. The bad thing is you've just lost one of your workers, which in a worker placement game, the last thing you want to do is lose one of your workers. And just to rub it in, you've now got to supply that army with golden rice for the rest of the game.
Got to feed and heat, right?
So you've got this wonderful trade-off of, do I go for the military action now so that I can score the victory points for a longer period of time, but am I prepared also to lose this worker, which is going to be really important in me being able to continue doing things? I love that tension of that decision.
And you'd almost think that this is one of, the best games of the year that it came out. And I think that was 2013. And yes, it is. Some people have said it's the best game of the decade. I think that might be a little bit much, but I think it's definitely in the conversation. I think for what it is, Three Kingdoms Redux, I've had a love affair with this game and also a sentimental aspect of it. So yeah, I've talked about this game for...
I'm not done. I've still got another wonderful thing about
go,
this game.
please. My bad. Go.
So the other wonderful thing of this game is that I talked about how each general has these couple of numbers. So they're different in that respect. There's also something like each of the three players has something like 20 30 generals to choose from, of which you'll only use half a dozen in the game. And each general, in addition to the two numbers, has a special power, special little superpower that they get as well. So you've got a really interesting variation in the games as to, well, what generals are available to me in this game, and how do I use this particular general's power and use it in combination with the other generals, so you've got a bit of a combo forming. I mean, that also is not something I've seen in other worker placement games, where you have these very individualized workers. And then the thematic element of the game, which doesn't come through as much to us because I'm not familiar with the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. But if you know the story, I mean, just for the fill-in, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms is one of the great classic pieces of Chinese literature. It's kind of like a Chinese Shakespeare, as it were. It was written in the Ming Dynasty, which is kind of 1300s, 1400s, and it's about Chinese history in the kind of 100, 200 ADs. So it's a historical novel, as it were, very well known, and if you're into Chinese literature, apparently, which I'm not, but I'll take it that you are. And there's TV programs of it and all the rest of it. And the game, of course, is very much rooted in that. All of the generals that you have in the game are characters in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And their special powers all come from elements in that story.
And there was one other aspect when we played the game that I forget which of you mentioned it, but the fact that when you recruit your generals, you get a choice out of some number, say draw 3, pick 1 type thing. The ones you don't pick don't go to the bottom of the stack. They get shuffled in. And so you could come up with a bit of a story in your head that, they were turned away. We didn't need that aspect in which they excel, but they came back later on because, again, you're shuffling the deck and you might see them the next time you go and recruit generals. We would be, make very good use of whatever their special ability is. So thematic in that regard as well. The artwork is beautiful. If you get it direct from the publisher, you got the little artwork book that details it. You can tell that this is very much a passion project and a labor of love for the designers, Christina and Youster, and they hit it out of the park. It's wonderful. It really is.
Another little bonus. I got my version from the Board Game Geek store because the shipping from Singapore is pretty hefty if you're only buying one copy. If it's more than 2 copies involved, and I think it's more reasonable. But I just got the single one. When I got the box and opened it up, obviously it's been in storage for quite a while, and it's got that lovely smell of old books. And I was kind of snorting the box, to get that old box smell. And that's an extra bonus for it. Now it's sitting on my shelf, and if there are 2 other suitable gamers who come round, that's going to be top of my list to play, because it is really quite a special game.
Yeah, Three Kingdoms Redux, ever since it came out, and briefly I'll touch on the story. It's the first ever review copy that was sent to us direct from a factory. They airshipped it over, and it's a couple. The publisher, the starting player, which it then got picked up and reprinted by Capstone, but they airshipped it over, and I still have that copy. I refuse to ever get rid of that copy. So sentimental, yes, but also it's a really damn good game.
Yes.
So if you're into Euros, don't let the 3-player only, unless you're predominantly a solo player. I get that then, but outside of that, it's a gem. It's an absolute gem. To me, it's a Hall of Fame game. And I've been talking about it for, oh my God, almost 10 years now.
Yeah, I'll need to play it a few more times before I'm convinced it's a Hall of Fame game, but it's definitely on the Hall of Fame track for me.
It's so good. So yeah, Three Kingdoms Redux. So real quick, I will talk about a couple of solo games that I'm smitten with, and one of which I knew I would be. The other I was completely surprised about. The first one, Nemo's War. I love Nemo's War, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Never read the book, but I feel like I kind of got a pretty good grasp of it from playing the game. It makes me want to go read the book. But that said, it's an awesome narrative-driven solo game. You can play it 2 players now, the Ultimate Edition, yada, 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 but everybody that I know thinks of it as a solo game. And it has a lot of die rolling, but you can mitigate a lot of those die rolls in it, where you are taking the Nautilus out, and there are a ton of different ways that you can play the game. There are things called motives, which are basically your little scoring card, and it says sinking warships is either going to be highly beneficial, you're going to score bonus points for those at the end of the game, or maybe if you're going adventuring, maybe sinking warships or freighters isn't something that you go after. You do have to do some level of that, but that's not, so you lose some of the points that you would gain from that. Or maybe discovering wonders or discovering treasures or scientific discoveries. And it all varies by the way you want to play the game. And it has this deck of cards that you customize. It's a random deck in that you set it up like the 3rd chapter. Depending on the difficulty, you add maybe 5, 6, 7, or 8 cards into the 3rd chapter. Then you put a stack of cards on top of that, and then a stack of cards for the 1st chapter, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's as thematic as you want it to be. It could be simply a mechanical game to where you're not reading the flavor text. You're just doing what it says. You're rolling, you're sinking ships, you're doing whatever it is you need to do. But the thematic aspects of this game, if you're a war gamer, it's a lighter version of The Hunters, because the narrative that is being told in your story when you're going through your adventure here on your tour, if you will, is just fantastic. It's one of my all-time favorite solo games. Huge fan of Nemo's War. I played it recently when we got the Ultimate Edition, and it has all the expansions. Yeah, it's just a win. I love it. I'm really, really big fan. And y'all know me. I'm not a huge die roller. Like, I don't like those really big stand-up die rolls, even though, yes, Oath has similar in that as well. But in spite of that, I think it's a great game. The game that really caught me off guard, speaking of solo games, is Aeonzen. Now, it's a co-op. It's predominantly, I believe, played multiplayer co-op. Y'all know I'm not a fan of co-ops. So when I hear co-op, I'm thinking, ooh, solo. And so I recently streamed a couple of plays of the Past and Present, which is the expansion for, I forget the other, it's not the base game, but it's like the standalone base game that it could be the newer version of it. And I got to be honest, if you want a fantasy-driven solo game, that isn't Mage Knight, I think Aeonzen has a lot going for it. It has a campaign aspect to where it has stuff to where, oh, if you win this battle, you get to open up this package and you get more cards, you get
Right.
more characters you could play, more bad guys that you could defeat, stuff like that. But you don't have to do it. You could just theoretically just open everything up and boom, you have everything. I'm probably going to get some people that'll, when I say this, but I understand why Mage Knight is as loved and arguably the majority of solo gamers, number one solo game of all time that isn't maybe like D-Day at Omaha Beach. Still got to play that. Mage Knight is too much for me. It's too long. It's too intricate. I can appreciate it, and I think it's an amazing game. I think it's wonderful if that's your cup of tea. To me, it's a step too far for what it is I'm looking for in a solo game.
Yeah, I played it once and I had a similar reaction.
It's massive in every way, both in table space as well as scope and feel. And so it gives you just this, it's something that you could play over days solo, take your time thinking about and breaking it up into a day-night. Maybe that's one sitting you play over multiple days. That's fine if that's your thing. It's not. But I really think that Aeonzen, in some ways, scratches the same itch that Mage Knight does in a fraction of the amount of time to play it. It doesn't have the map. It doesn't have the exploration that does. But in a lot of ways, what I want to get from Mage Knight, Aeonzen kind of gives me. It's not a apples to apples comparison. Let me be clear. They are nothing alike in scope or in just grandeur. But for that, being able to figure out clever combos that Mage Knight provides, if that is your real big thing and the thing that drives you towards Mage Knight, Aeonzen is amazing at that. I thought it was a really, really wonderful bite-sized piece of Mage Knight.
How would you compare it to Spirit Island then?
I wouldn't know. I've yet to play Spirit Island.
Okay.
And here's the thing. Spirit Island, it's a co-op, right? So again, when Spirit Island came out, I was like, maybe. And that was when I was starting to consider playing solo games. And so it just feels like I just missed it. Like I just missed it in the rotation, and it's not one that I'm clamoring to go back and try. I will at some point for the solo aspect, and the fact that it has some historical not situations, but scenarios that you could do, that appeals to me. But as a whole, I'm just not clamoring for it. But I do want to play it, I guess, at some time.
Yeah,
at some point.
I tried Spirit Island a couple of times, and I quite liked it. I'd like to play it more. I'm not as averse to co-ops as you are, so I'm quite happy to do the co-op thing. And what I liked about Spirit Island was it felt that it was sufficiently complicated that you couldn't have one person alpha play, which is the biggest problem for me with co-ops, is when you got somebody else.
Agreed.
It sets up an alpha play. Yeah. That might interest me also with Aeonzen. I don't know, but I haven't actually got round to getting Spirit Island or anything.
Fair enough. Right. That's what I was going to do. Let's think about this. Sorry, Greg. By the way, Greg's our podcast editor, so this being live, yeah, you get the idea. Anyway, I think I've come to understand why I don't like co-ops. Is they just go against why I play board games. Not go against, it's just not why I'm playing board games. I'm not trying to team up with somebody to take out the big baddie or, for the greater good. It's a competition decision making. That's absent in a co-op.
Yep.
And it's, do we do a good job of making good decisions? I get that. But and here's the thing. I have recently had the epiphany or change of motivation when we're playing games to where I don't want to go after people. I don't want to be mean-spirited. I don't want to be still going to be competitive, but not at the my main driving thing is to make sure that everybody at the table is having fun and have a good time and be pleasant.
You never struck me as a kind of mean-spirited gamer, though. To be quite
No,
honest.
but there have been times to where I try and win too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like that aspect of me in the way I was doing it. So I've kind of shifted the way I want to play games. And so I'm still trying to win a game, but I'm not going to do something at the expense of somebody else in a... Yes, obviously there are situations where, okay, if I do this, yes, it hurts you, but it's clearly the right thing I need to do. Still going to do that. Let's be clear. But what I'm not going to do is be like, hey, Martin, screw you, dude. Boom.
Right.
And do that. I just, that doesn't feel good to me.
Right.
And I want to get away from that.
Right. Okay.
So, but that said, I'm still trying to beat you in a game. And so therefore a co-op just doesn't have that. It removes that aspect, which if that's the case, then I'd much rather play a solo game, which is how I treat co-ops. Or if that's the case, I'll just go play Elden Ring on, and I'll just play by myself, something solo video game wise. So yeah, no, that's why I really don't like co-ops is it removes that competition and decision making.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So you want to talk Autobahn, or at least the prototype of Autobahn, right?
Yeah, that was, I thought, quite a nice game that we did. So the theme of Autobahn is you're building, highways in Germany. Surprise, surprise. And it's got one of those things I really like about the game, which is the things that you build to help your own position will also help other people as well. So that there is this nice element of, yeah, I want to do this, but I'm also going to be helping somebody else. Then you watch somebody else do, they're doing something that's going to really help me. So I can kind of, and perhaps even do a little bit of temporary cooperation to extend this highway in a particular direction. But at the same time, you're also competing to try and grab a particular set of points or something of that kind. And I felt Autobahn did a quite good job of that. I thought its rules, I'll be talking later on and moaning about Baroque combinations of rules, and I didn't think this suffered particularly from that. The rules were relatively made sense and hung together in a cohesive way.
That's fair, yeah.
I'm not saying it was an outstanding game. It had a few bits that I felt were kind of a bit too fiddly to be worthwhile, and didn't end up justifying the wait. And that was, I think, where it kind of fell down a little bit for me. But of the heavyish games that have kind of passed over the table so far this year, this was one of the ones that I would rate more highly of the recent batch, I would say.
Don't know that I would agree wholeheartedly with that last bit. It was fine. But yeah, for me, it overstayed its... Let me try that again. The fiddliness aggravated me a little bit in a way that like a Masters of Venice doesn't for fiddliness, which I realize that's going pretty obscure. I understand, but it's a game that I've recently played that I love, and the fiddliness doesn't bother me in that. Whereas it did kind of not sit. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze, I think is what I'm trying to say, okay? Now, I will say that Fabio, being the designer on the game, this is definitely a big step up in complexity for him, and I like seeing that. And I think the game was solid, but for me, it was fine.
Right.
And it just, I think if I were to sum it up in a single sentence, it was fine, but the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, I'm not going to go so far as to say the juice was worth the squeeze for me either. I just felt it was better than most of the other ones that we ran into of a similar weight this year. And that was why I felt it was worth highlighting. I also got this sense of something, perhaps a second edition or something, it had potential.
Which
But I'm not sure how to get there. I'm not a game developer. I'm not a game designer, so I don't know. But I had that sense of this wasn't that far away from getting to something where it might have been.
yeah, and now full disclosure, we played a prototype, right? So
And only twice.
Some of the fiddliness might get developed out through whether that's components or whether that's graphic design, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. So I don't want to be too heavy-handed with what is a prototype. And I mean, it was recently on Kickstarter, so it doesn't even exist yet.
Right.
It's going to be out not for a number of months. So I will say this. I didn't dislike it to the level that I have no interest in trying it when it is published. I do want to, and I'm curious to see from where we played it as the prototype, where it is in the final edition. And that I am interested in trying. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
All right. So bounce back. So y'all, for those that are watching on YouTube, you see Struggle of Empires up there. I did that sort of as a tease on a weekly look ahead, which that's not fair. I'm sorry. And I did it tonight as a blatant tease again. But here's the good news. We recently played it 5 players. Relatively recently. I want to say like 3-4 weeks ago. And lived up like it. I really enjoyed it. It's a long game. It's going to be a weekend stream type thing. Like we get started early in the morning and we'll finish in the late afternoon, early evening type thing. And we do want to do it 5, 6, or 7 players. But I will say this, the new version, the deluxe edition, if you will, from Eagle Griffin, it's nice. It's really nice to play. It is incredibly pretty. And just, imagine a Vital Lacerda production from Eagle Griffin. It's that.
Right.
Okay. So to put it for those that are unfamiliar with it, it's classic Martin Wallace. It is heavy negotiation. So keep that in mind if that's not your bag. And it's very much direct conflict. So keep that in mind for this type of game. The old Struggle of Empires, it was 5 or 7 players only. I don't care what the box said. It was 5 or 7 players only because of the way that the Grand Alliances worked. We played it at 5, and then there are 2 kind of bots that kind of help. They don't really do a lot, but they're just enough there to help given sides. So even though I've only played it 5 players, I see how it would work 6 players, which normally, again, going to that Grand Alliance thing, 6 players just wasn't a good number in which to be able to play it. I see that working really well in this edition. And squeezing 7 in the studio here, little suspect. So we're probably going to look at 5 or 6 in that regards. But man, I got to say, I really enjoyed the game. It feels old school Wallace, and that's a compliment in this regards. Mechanically not super difficult. It's long because you have a lot of things to think about, and there's a lot of turns in this game. But yeah, man, I'm excited to stream that game. So I think the plan is to try and get together 6 of us to play it, 6 players, one more time before we stream it, and then stream it. So end of summer, maybe somewhere around that time frame. And see if we can do that. But yeah, really, really enjoyed my 1 play so far of Struggle of Empires. And I don't know costs involved. I don't know how available the older edition of Struggle of Empires is, but the development that went into, I guess, some of the things, it's one of those older games where, we just know we play it this way. Some of that development has gone into the deluxe edition or the newer version of it, and it shows. It played super smooth, and man, it's pretty. So if that's your thing, I definitely could recommend it. Struggle of Empires. Really, really want to play more of that. So big fan of that one. That, not your game. I'll just go.
Right.
No,
Okay.
not you. All right, 18 Chess Speak.
Yeah, so this is a game I either love it or I can't play it. I can't figure out which. I mean, this has generally been true of 18xx. I've played a few games of 18xx, and what it comes down to is there's a lot I really love about 18xx. The rules aren't really that complicated.
They're really not. No.
There's a lot of depth to the strategy. Route building. Route building is one of my all-time favorite mechanics. So I love the route building. It's very interactive. I like interactive games. There's just enough things to be thinking about that have depth, but not sort of the massive rules stuff. So this is all great. I like the fact that there's a nice historic element to it, and you're playing on maps of the world with train companies that are based on the train companies of time. All that's perfect for me. The stock stuff doesn't worry me. It's interesting. I don't really know how to do stuff with stock things, but it's not an issue. The one thing that is killing me with these games is the mental arithmetic. And I'm not talking about the mental arithmetic of the money payouts, because the spreadsheet handles that no trouble at all. It's the route calculations. You've always got to be looking at the board, figuring out and mentally adding up the numbers. Now, I may be weird in some respect. When I was at school, if you asked me to solve a partial differential equation, yeah, can do that. I'll symbolically integrate these complicated expressions. Can't do them now. I could certainly do them then. On the other hand, ask me to add up a bridge score of about 5 fairly simple numbers, and I'm got the calculator out. I just can't do that mental arithmetic thing. So adding up half a dozen numbers as I'm figuring out my route, what I'm doing is I'm adding it up, and I'm thinking I've probably got that wrong, because I always get this wrong. So I'll add it up again, and then they both came to the same answer, but maybe I'll try it again, and it's slow. Each time is slow, and I'm stressing out because I think I might get it wrong. And the result is an absolute nightmare for me. Now, I have discovered that if Alyssa's on the table, I'm okay, because she can compute routes like none.
She's an actuary. I would hope so.
And on top of it, is quite happy to help you out. Just saying, oh yeah, that route's this much, this route's that much, and I'm going kind of, okay, didn't even add up the first 2 numbers there, and she's got the whole route calculated. So, playing with Alyssa, it works. But otherwise, and then when Cindy and I did 2-player 18 Chesapeake, we were going okay for a bit, but the problem is Cindy has exactly the same problem with mental arithmetic I have, so it was torture.
I'm not laughing at the struggle. I'm just picturing the both of you at the table. I'm enjoying that picture.
Yeah, so I don't know. And 18 Chesapeake, I think, succeeds on many counts. It's a shorter game. You can play it quite easily in a few hours. It's approachable for new players like me, who hasn't done a lot of 18xx. I like the fact that it's got the initial auction is always a contentious issue with 18xx, because if you don't know how to value things, how the hell can the first thing you do in the game be take part in an auction for things that are going to settle the game?
Aeonzen would like to stand up and be recognized at this point, as well as Power Grid. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's worse though for 18xx, because
it is.
The decision really, you can completely shoot yourself in the foot very easily on that first auction.
Fair.
And the nicely thing that Chesapeake does by getting away, it says quite clear on the box. Look, the price on the box for each item is a fair price. So you don't really feel like you got to play a lot with the auction thing. You can just say, okay, it's a variable setup mechanic, basically, which is nice, because that's, it's for players who are just coming into 18xx. So there's a lot of lovely things about the game, and I actually did buy a copy. I'm just, if I can only figure out how to solve the mental arithmetic thing. Now, of course, one way of solving it was to play it online, because I'm told 18xx Games does a magnificent job, and it will do the route stuff for you. But I don't want to play online. I want to play in cardboard with people. So, I don't know. Do I hate 18xx and 18 Chesapeake, or do I love it? Do I score it a 6 or a 3 on the heavy cardboard scale? I don't know.
Wow. Okay. So there's that. I thought it was a great jumping off point. I think that it's lived up to, this is a really good intro to 18xx, but still being viable to experienced players after a handful of plays. So yeah, win.
And there's actually somebody in the chat commented that the problem they have, this mental arithmetic problem, is the same problem we have with Power Grid. And I sympathise with that, because I have that problem as well. But it's only in the last couple of turns that I really find the Power Grid mechanic kicks in. And it's also relatively easy to fiddle it out with a calculator. Although, again, it's really handy if you've got Alyssa or Edward on the table to math out the connections for you. But with 18xx, it's hammering you the whole time. And it's a mental strain that I don't like. I mean, there are mental strains I kind of like playing games, and there's mental strains I don't, and I just stress out. And it may be going back to when I was a kid and feeling, my mental arithmetic's hopeless, and I'm being teased by everybody for pulling the calculator out to add 3 numbers together for the bridge score.
And it's never ending in an 18xx because every operations round, right?
Yep.
Every OR, you're going through that. There are 18xx calculators out there, but again, I don't know if that.
They don't do the root calculation, though. How can they? Because it's just too complicated to do the root calculation.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it wears on me after a handful of hours. At about hour 4 is where it starts. I start getting a little worn down from that same thing, to be honest. So you're not alone, and I don't struggle with it like you do. But even so, it's a constant thing for me. And obviously we are not playing 18xx nearly as much as those that, really love it. So we're not exercising that muscle as much, I suppose, but it's an obvious barrier, right?
Yeah.
For those that have that. And even for me who doesn't, it still gets to be a chore after a while.
But I can totally see why people get in love with 18xx, because the fact you've got a system of games that are similar, they're quick to like the Age of Steam thing, it's really really tempting. But I also have to bear in mind the fact that maybe it's something like me with things like rock climbing or kayaking, where I don't have upper body strength, so I can't do those, even though they're the kind of things I would like to do. And sometimes you just got to accept, oh well. But at least, we've got an Alyssa in the neighborhood, so that helps.
There's that. So speaking of Age of Steam, we have recently played a lot of Age of Steam here on the show. They Eagle Griffin recently had their Kickstarter for the expansion maps, and we played a host of them, 6 or 7 of them, and unfortunately Martin was gone for that. The timing, that was just unfortunate. That was a bummer.
Oh, it was painful.
But even outside of those maps, this just in, Age of Steam is great. It's a system that it's like what we were talking about with 18xx. It's a core system that is set up, and there are MacGuffins for each map, little things that make every map different, and it never gets old. And do you need 150 maps like some of us have? No. Do you probably want 6 or 7 or, a handful, maybe a dozen? Yes. And then that's plenty, because every time you play the same map, just the cube draw and the way that comes out is going to make for an interesting and more compelling, or a different game, I should say. And that in and of itself makes for a compelling game.
Yeah, someday as well, when we're talking about in-depth versions of this podcast, I'd really like to do a little fantasy of mine is to do an in-depth that looks at Age of Steam and its siblings. That's Steam Rails to Riches and Railways of the World, and looks at them, comparing them and contrasting them. I've played standard Steam, but not base Steam. And I've played Railways of the World since it went on BGA. And so now I feel I've got a bit of a handle as to how they compare. And I think that would be quite an interesting episode to record.
I haven't played Railways of the World in a hot minute, but I have played it. For the majority of the heavy cardboard listener base, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Age of Steam is probably where they settle out.
Yep.
But that's not to disparage Railways, which is probably the lightest of the 3. Steam fits somewhere in the middle, and then you have Age of Steam. And different strokes for different folks, but Age of Steam is it's hard to call it a game. It's really a system. And don't get me wrong, the Rust Belt map, perfectly solid. It is a good map for 4 or 5 players. But
Indeed.
The system that was created makes it one of, if not the best games in existence because of that system, provided you like auctions, you like route building, yada, yada, yada. And, hey, this just in. We do. So there you go. But yeah, Age of Steam just never gets old. So, all right, moving on. You wanted to talk a little Seize the Bean action.
All right. So Seize the Bean is a game I ran into completely by accident at the long, many, many years ago, we cast our minds back to the last HeavyCon before COVID. And one of the things at HeavyCon is you get given these games, a little bag of games. And in my bag of games, there was a little piece of paper instead of a game that said, this is a free Kickstarter version of this game that I'd never heard of called Seize the Bean. And I remember somebody coming up to me who clearly knew a lot more about this, and she said, oh, that's a really hot game. You're lucky to have got that. And I thought, okay. And then the Kickstarter went into all sorts of God knows what disasters happened. I wasn't following it closely because I wasn't on the mailing list of the Kickstarter, but there
Fast
were
forward
delays.
17 years, it finally has delivered.
It apparently was quite a nightmare, but it finally appeared, and we gave it a few games, and I'm rather liking it. The theme is that you're running a coffee shop in Berlin, and this is a very thematic game. So you do get a sense of you're running a coffee shop in Berlin. You have customers that basically come in as a deck building exercise. So you do a deck build of pulling 2 or 3 customers each round into line. You can invest in upgrades to your coffee shop that give you extra powers. And at the same time, you've got to make sure you acquire coffee and milk and sugar so that you can feed all the people in line. And it creates this, actually it was a complaint by one of the first players. He said, what I don't like about this game is I've got to choose between getting more coffee or upgrading my store. And to which my reaction is, yeah, that's the whole point. You've got this difficult decision. Do I get more coffee or do I risk it, upgrade my store for an extra power and hope I'm going to be able to serve everybody in line? And there's a really interesting quality of the way it builds that it took me a few games to appreciate. You'll move very, very slowly for 3 or 4 rounds, and then, bam, you'll get a huge amount of points. And the game is all about getting to the bam as fast as possible. And then, of course, if somebody else gets there as quickly as you do, you want a slightly bigger bam. And what you're looking to do is you've got 6 categories of customers, each of which have different characteristics, and you want to combo them or maybe all in on one of them. But the interesting thing is there are, in the box, 20 different categories, and you get a different 6 each game. So kind of like Dominion, you've got this different mix of different possibilities from each game. I've only played with the standard 6. I've played about half a dozen times. I actually want to play it more, and even with the standard 6, to discover how to make them all go bam.
And there are a plethora of extra decks. Like how many?
20 decks.
Which is ridiculous, right? Yep. The amount of replayability from that aspect. But the game's mechanically very simple. The iconography is pretty good for the most part. And I've enjoyed my plays. And it's a thematic game that every time we've played it, we've just had fun with it. And I think that's one of the best compliments you could give a game is if a game is... Now, I'm looking up on the shelf and there's this War of Mine. Probably not a game that I'm always, that's going to be fun. I get that. So different games going for different things. But I know the designer and I know and the publisher for Seize the Bean, and trying to just have a fun, good time at the table, absolutely, while making obviously a good game, was their goal. I think they nailed it. The production quality is fantastic. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It has a whimsical art feel to it, and it just works. Yeah. And it's thoroughly been a lot of fun. It's not a word that, it's like worth. Is a game worth X? I don't know what a game is worth to you, and I don't know what is fun to you, but for me, this was just a fun time every single time we played it, even when it went catastrophically badly for me. I still had fun with it because it was comical, because it's kind of telling that thematic story of how bad my coffee shop was. And it was just, we just had a blast with it. And so Seize the Bean seems to be a hit here at HCHQ and adjacent.
Yeah.
So next one I'll talk about real briefly, Crystal Palace. Again, we recently got it to the table, and I don't care the player count. It's a dice placement game where dice are your workers, but it has such one core concept that just makes the game so damn good. the pips on the dice, you never roll your dice, which is how dice should be, but the pips on the dice are the strength or the power of your worker. You get to choose whatever you want it to be. You just got to pay for it. And juggling that economy between worker strength and legitimate economy of your liquidity is so good. There's a lot more to the game, but that's the core mechanism that is just, why don't more games do that? Like, that surprised me, and I can't think of any. I'm sure there are some, but I couldn't think of any, and I'm so smitten with that one aspect of the game that I really enjoy the game regardless of player count. I don't care how long it runs. It's just so good. There was one problem, if you will, one major glaring problem with the game that we found, at least, which was with that choosing the strength of your workers. Let's say the total pips of my dice was 17, right? And we're playing a 4-player game. If the player to my left and I was a high bid, along with the player to my left also bid 17, then it becomes a tiebreaker situation to where, even though high bid is who plays first, and then it's clockwise from that player. If the player to my left wins the tiebreaker on that, they're first. So I paid the most money at 17 or whatever arbitrary number it might be, but now I'm going last. That sucks. So we house ruled a very simple thing, and I think this is fairly common and for those that are familiar with Crystal Palace, which was, okay, if you lose the tiebreaker, the loser of the tiebreaker decides the direction of the play. Either it's clockwise or anti-clockwise, and that solved that problem. Boom, in an easy fix. And yeah, we have just about everybody that I've played Crystal Palace with has really enjoyed it. There are some, it's not their cup of tea. But yeah, I'm really, really smitten with Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I played it once a long time ago and it made no impression on me, but maybe I should give it another try at some point.
Fair enough. All right, so talk about a game I've never played, Blue Lagoon.
All right, so I've been trying to weasel my way into as many Knizias as possible. And I think younger Martin just brought it along, and I thought, I'd love to give it a try. Or maybe I'd mentioned that I wanted to play
He
it.
recently brought Samurai out.
Yes. You also, not just did you play all those games of Age of Steam without me, you also played Samurai without me.
But we're going to bring it around so you can play it, we promise.
Good. Anyway, so he brought Blue Lagoon, which is one of there's been a sort of relatively recent batch of Knizia games over the last 5 or so years, where people are saying, hey, he's got back to his old quality of what he was pumping out in the late 90s, early zeros. We played Babylonia, which we really enjoyed. I got El Dorado, which I really love. And this was a chance to play Blue Lagoon. Not a huge amount I can say about it, in the sense it's a fairly straightforward tile-laying game. You're tile-laying over this archipelago of islands that is somewhat randomly set up, and you get points having the most tiles on an island or being connected to the most islands in a connection. And there are resources on the islands that you build your tiles to grab. The particularly interesting thing about it is that you do your tile laying in 2 phases. Your first phase, you can start laying on any sea place and then adjacent after that. But during that first phase, you drop special markers, and during the second phase, you only can go from the adjacency to your special markers that you dropped during the first phase, which puts an interesting little sense of, okay, you're playing for the first round, but you're trying to set yourself up for the second round, and then in the second round, you're in a much more constrained situation, and you're faced with the result of the choices from the first. All in all, it just makes it a very nice, nifty piece of Knizia gaming. And I have to say, with that, El Dorado and Babylonia, I mean, those 3 alone are enough for me to say that he's definitely up to that same form that he was earlier on.
Nice. I've never played it, so I can't speak to it. I will say, as an aside, we recently played Medici again. Yep, still holds up. Fantastic. Awesome at 6. All right at 5. But it's 6. Great. Because that way all the goods come out. So, this just in. Rainer Knizia, Hall of Famer. All right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he, to me, is the epitome of just enough rules so that you don't have very much rules complexity, but always enough depth to get interesting. Pulls that off time and time again.
I think as try that again. I recently looked at his bio on BGG, and I want to say he has 600, 700, 800 published games to his credit. That's staggering. I mean, when you do it for a living, I get that, but that's a stupid big number. Don't get me wrong. I mean, sometimes he does, 5 variations of the same game or whatnot, but man, when he hits it right, right? I mean, he has countless. I would say at least half a dozen, if not a dozen, like if not Hall of Fame, like right up there. Games. That's pretty impressive. All right, so I got 2 other games. Well, we got 2 each.
Okay.
2 of which you've never played.
Yep.
And so I'll go and hit on those briefly. Hey, this just in, Ark Nova. Really enjoy that game. Apparently from Civilizations, the newish one, Civilizations, of having a tableau of, okay, you have like 5 cards out here, and they get stronger as they go higher in count. So a card in the 1 slot has a power of 1, whereas if it were in the 5 slot, it is at maximum power or value in that case. This game uses that mechanism there for building a zoo, and I think it's 90% great. I really do. I think it's really wonderful. I loved my play of the solo game. Thought it was fantastic. And the multiplayer is fine. I think it kind of suffers from, in a lot of ways, what A Feast for Odin does, which is a lot of multiplayer solitaire in a deck that is way too big for the game. Because if you go for certain strategies, it's possible it's just impossible for those to be viable. So that said, Ark Nova, really enjoyed it overall, I would say. It's not without issue, but solo, I thought it was really great. I really enjoyed it. Really simple, like timer or AI to run in this, which is a hallmark of a really good solo, in my opinion. And the way it works, it just worked really, really well. So Ark Nova is still high on my list.
Okay.
And the only other one that I wanted to really mention, well, I guess 2 real quick. Masters of Venice, fiddly, ugly, still awesome. Love it. We played it last weekend. And we did a full review of that some number of years on the podcast as well. So, yeah, Masters of Venice, ugly as sin, but so good. And Praga Kaput Regni, I never played it multiplayer until a couple months ago. And I'd only played it solo. Really enjoyed it solo. Loved it multiplayer. We had such a good time. It's from the same designer as Shipyard. It's not as good as Shipyard, in my opinion, but still a really good game. And it's one of those positive reinforcement games that, okay, I didn't get to do what I wanted to do because you got in my way. Okay, I can do this other thing that, that felt really good. I did really cool stuff, and it felt good, even if I didn't win. And there is absolutely a place in this hobby for those type of games, to where just everything about the game is a positive reinforcement. There are games like Age of Steam where that's not the case. But I am amazingly smitten with Praga Kaput Regni, and I didn't think that I would have been. That's Vladimir Sushi, designer on that, and I love my plays of it. I'm not going to go into big details. It's been a big enough hit. People know about it. But yeah, just really, really, really enjoy Praga, and
I'd like to try. Yeah.
We need to get you to play it, because I think that's a game that you would really enjoy.
Okay.
All right, so the last big 2. We'll start off Imperial Steam.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how much we want to talk about this, because we actually are close to being able to do a full
we're gonna do a full dive, and it's a mixed bag for me for sure.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
We haven't played it at 2. That's the only count I haven't tried it at. It's got what's it got going for it? You got a bit of not route building, route claiming. I'd make a distinction between, because the tracks are on the map set. You can't create your own track like you can in Age of Steam. You can claim tracks, so it's more like Power Grid in that sense. It's got a nice progression in the sense that you're starting at Vienna, everybody's kind of aiming for Trieste, and you've got to get necessary stuff on the way. It's got a fair bit of contention in racing for spots. The thing about the game that I think is really where you're either going to love it or you hate it, it's one of those games where you can figure out what you need to do next. The hard part is figuring out how on earth are you going to get the necessary resources to do the thing that you know you want to do next. And you can easily get yourself into a position where you are stuck. And you basically have to tread water for a round or two, watching everybody else make progress while you can barely just get that one bit of wood that you need in order to move a little bit further forward. And it can be pretty depressing if you get yourself in that hole.
So, moral of the story, don't get yourself in that hole, but once you're in it, then you can get stuck.
And
right?
It's very easy to get put in that hole, because if somebody else gets to a key spot before you, bump, your game's just gone down the toilet. And that, some people are not going to like that, because it can be really painful trying very hard to do something that seems kind of obvious, but you just can't get the stuff together to do it.
I want to like the game more than I do. I think for me, the production quality was great. The lineage of the game, it's same designer as Lignum and Alexander Weimer. And the game is good. Don't get me wrong. It's a solid game. But man, when you get in that position, or if there is ever it is a game that accentuates AP. And it very much it encourages. Is that the right way to?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I think it encourages AP. And I think that's my biggest issue, both in myself as well as other players. It's one of those games that because you can calculate out or anticipate how things are going to go. And so you're looking a turn or two out, and then it's such a razor's edge in some regards, to where if you either misjudge or somebody completely zags when you thought they were going to zig, it can completely thwart. And that flies in the face of a Praga game where that is a pure positive reinforcement game. This very much is not that. And you have to be prepared for that, but also just the fact that it encourages AP is just a tough pill to swallow for me.
Yeah, it reminds me a fair bit of the Voyages of Marco Polo, because also in that game you're in a situation where you know what you want to do, and what you're trying to do is figure out, well, how can I assemble my next 3 or 4 moves in some way that I can, and you're spending a lot of time trying every possible combination of things that you could do, and every time you're coming up one camel short. And for some people, that kind of challenge is what they go for in a game. For others, they're going to struggle with it. And if you're not the person who struggles with it, you won't like Imperial Steam.
And, for me, I got to be in the right mindset, and I got to be in the right place to be able to play a game like that. And when I do, I enjoy it. If I don't, very much not. And also, okay, can we do away with 2 words from board games? Imperial and Steam. Imperial struggle, Imperial Steam. I don't know anybody else that does this, but those two, like, I am so interchanging these.
Yep.
It's yeah, enough on that. So, but yeah, we will definitely probably. That's really Edward,
I think that's
probably.
I can be pretty firmly confident that you're definitely probably.
Hear a full review of that in the coming months from Martin and myself. All right, so let's talk about a game that I didn't think there was a snowball's chance in hell would live up to the hype that it came with from our local group, from Shrey and Derek, and that is Carnegie. Carnegie. This is a hill I fought and died on and lost. Did y'all know Andrew Carnegie? That is not how you say his name. I was like, no, it's it's Carnegie. Apparently, it's Scottish, and it's Carnegie. I did not know that. I corrected you, and I was wrong. I apologize.
Well, I can't remember whether it's Carnegie or Carnegie, but I think it's Carnegie. But I know it's not Carnegie.
Fact. Anyway, for us Americans, Carnegie, really good game. Surprisingly, it's a Euro's Euro.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think that's fair to say. It's got a nice map that you're contesting over, and with some nice decisions about where do I go? Do I go rapidly to a spot? Am I going to get blocked? That kind of thing. You've got some nice build-up of your office department. You have this kind of office block, and you fill it with departments, and each department gives you a bit more power in the game. One of the things I particularly like about it is that it uses a mechanic that's not used very often, which is a classic mechanism, which is referred to as, I've heard it was referred to as role selection, which is if it's your turn, you choose the action that everybody's going to do. You do it first, and then everyone else does it. The game that's known for working with this, of course, is Puerto Rico. And in Puerto Rico, the person who chooses the action gets a bonus. This isn't the case in Carnegie. You just get to do it first. But it's a lovely mechanism because you're not necessarily thinking what action is going to be the best for me in my position. You're also looking at everybody else thinking, yeah, this may not be the best action for me, but it really sucks for everybody else. So I get a definite advantage by taking it now and getting a jump on other people.
It just flowed perfectly well. Like, I hear our friend Dan in my head. It's better than perfectly cromulent. It just worked really well. And it is a point salad in a lot of ways, but just being able to build up your tableau with your little departments there and just manipulate your board, it felt good. It's not like a pure, positive reinforcement game. There is very much some of, oh, I took this, now you can't type thing as far as the donation spots go and so on and so forth. But it has a lot just that works really well. And it's very smooth. It's very relatively mechanically simple. And it's all bite-sized chunks. And it's just smooth. It's just all of the things that you're often going to want in a Euro. And it's just tied up in a really nice package that works really, really well. And the production is great, which adds to it. So it's funny. Long time ago, when I was first starting into this hobby, I really didn't care about production quality, right? You got your winsomes, you got, stuff that is more devoid of art, and it's all function over form. Fast forward to 2022, and this just in, we can get both.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Ian O'Toole's artwork, obviously I am a huge fan of his. Not just because he's a friend, but he does amazing art. I mean, he has the reputation that he does for a reason. Just does a masterful job of presenting the game in a really beautiful way. It has like a tri-level player board, which is completely over the top and unnecessary, but it's really damn nice. So if you can have it, yay. It raises production let's try that again, shall we? It raises production costs. So there could be an argument of, does it need to do this, that type thing. But I will say this, when it's on the table and we're sitting around playing this game, man, it sure feels good. Everything about this game just works really, really well.
It is, but I have to say for me, it again ended up in that fine category. It didn't sparkle. It felt a lot better than most of the other games of a similar class that have gone through here, as we'll be ranting about soon. And I think it held together better than those games, but it's still very point salady. There's still temple tracks, even though it does these little slider things that pull out the side. There's still frigging temple tracks that give you little bonuses and victory points as you march up them. It's still very point salady. on the other hand, it hangs together better, I think, than a lot of the games that, as said, that I've come across recently.
But I don't think it was trying to be any more than it is.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That I think the game set out to be a Euro's Euro.
Yep.
Check and check.
Yes.
It did that, and it did it very, very well. So if you're going to publish a game, or if a game's going to come out, in my opinion, it should follow one of two tenets. Bring something new to the table. This doesn't. Or do something, put it together in a unique way and make it really, really good. Do that well. And it did that really well. The downside on it is the theme is completely extraneous to what it is. At no point do I don't know why Andrew Carnegie's name is on the box.
No.
It's got nothing to do with it. No. Just what? So if you care about theme, no. But presentation-wise, beautiful. Production-wise, beautiful. Gameplay, super smooth. And still had teeth, right? Yep. And so, yeah, I think it did what it set out to do, and it did it well. So mission accomplished. But, yes, it is a Euro's Euro.
Yep. So that takes us through the list of games we wanted to go through.
Yeah, pretty much. And then we were going to hit on a number of other things that I'm sure people are going to ask questions about.
Yep.
Or at least wonder and whatever. And start off with, conventions. We went to PAX East for a couple days, fully masked. It required, vaccination, which, yes, it should, and required masks. So we went to it. It's local to us. That was good. But what I've realized, I don't really miss conventions. I miss meeting folks. I miss our friends, like whether that's publishers, designers, industry people that we haven't seen in years. Because, I'm thinking specifically like at Essen or something like that.
Right.
And I miss wandering the halls, trying to find those obscure little hidden gems. I miss those three things. So I miss the heavy cardboard. I miss the herd. I miss interacting with y'all out there. That's number one. I miss our friends and, interacting with them and seeing how their lives are doing and that. And I miss wandering the halls. I'm basically talking about Essen in this.
Yeah. Well, last time you came back from Essen, you came back with Yin Yang, which was a lovely little discovery. There was Formosa Tea, another game that otherwise I wouldn't have run into.
Right. So I miss being able to find these.
Yeah.
And it's just fun. Plus the behind the scenes day, like on Tuesday and Wednesday, is awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I miss Essen. I miss HeavyCon. Past that, nope. Not a single one do I. HeavyCon, if you would have told me it would have been this long, I would have said, no way. We're all, I'm currently reading The Passage by Justin Cronin. Apparently it's the end of the world. It's the vampire apocalypse out there. But our goal is to be ready for 2023 for HeavyCon, right? So yay on that. But as a general rule, when we went to PAX East, I just found myself not really missing anything about conventions other than those things. And how much do I miss them? Yes. But past those two conventions, I don't know how excited I am to go to anything else. And you look at what Origins did. Oh, hey, we're requiring masks and vaccination. Yay. Oh, just kidding. No, we're not. Wait, what? Oh, yeah, now we are again. Really? Come on, be responsible. But for me, so is Essen happening this year? I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, I think I would like a very limited convention schedule going forward. So yeah, so there's that. All right. So you had a thing here, the high produced reprints.
Yeah, it was a little theme that struck me because I was looking at what I've been doing Kickstarter-wise, and okay, I've got a couple of new games in the hopper. There's Stationfall, there's Hegemony, or Hegemony as they say over here, and of course Madeira, which, who knows if it's going to show or not. But the other thing has been older games that have been repackaged in much nicer production. So for a start, Ra, one of my all-time favourite games, a magnificent piece of Knizia from classic
Absolute
Knizia
gem.
picture.
Yes.
Tool artwork. Okay, here's my wallet. Take whatever you want. I mean, how can I resist? And it looks beautiful. I can't wait to get my hands on that. I have a perfectly good copy of Ra. I actually quite like the much disliked version that I've got, which was the last one that got published. I think it's nice, but it can't compete to Tool, right? So I'm really looking forward to having that.
I'm curious to see how it ends up. We'll see.
Okay. And then the ultimate of good game and crummy production quality finally gets a decent production quality game, which is Castles of Burgundy.
Why isn't this one Ian O'Toole?
Yeah, well, yes, there is that point. So there I'm actually a bit more unsure by the design, all the rest of it. It looked like a bit over the top. It went heavy on miniatures. You can get an all miniatures version where all the tiles become miniatures. You draw the tile out the bag and then you look for the miniature to put. I didn't get that version of it. It seemed a bit crazy. Even just the miniatures just for the castles seemed a little bit kind of seriously. Well, I guess it's only $10 more, and we were told by this guy on the herd, it's always worth paying $10 more for a few miniatures. So you might as well do that, and it will convince me of anything. That's kind of an in-joke because he's notorious for not liking overproduced things. But I'm getting Castles of Burgundy because I really want a decent production quality version of this. I actually even went for the not ceramic, but the special material, not the cardboard, the acrylic tiles, which perhaps is a little bit over the top, but this is a great game, and I think it would be nice to play it with nice components instead of those horribly flimsy, thin pieces of cardboard. And you do get all of the counties, or whatever they're called, duchies, that you get to play on. So you get a good set of upgrades and everything. There's an expansion in there that nobody's ever played that I'm very suspicious of because nobody's ever played it, and I don't like expansions as that kind of expansion as a rule. But hey, I can afford it. I'm glad to say that the original version is still available for people who don't want to pay an excessive amount of money for it.
It doesn't need it. Hey, you do you, right? And by you, I don't mean necessarily Martin. Just hey, if that's your thing, go for it. But honestly, you know what? In my opinion, Castles of Burgundy needed two things: thicker cardboard and Ian O'Toole's artwork. Sold, done. Anything past that is
fair.
Overproduced.
Yeah, it's overproduced, but it's overproduced, and I'm still going to go for it because
then clearly it's not overproduced because it seems to have found its market.
Right.
I guess, right?
Yep.
And then there's one that wounded me. That's Skyrise. All right. Metropolis, or Metropolis, in which Skyrise was built upon, is a great game. Legitimately great game. Ugly as sin. Oh my God, that board, the artwork is just horrible. Just ugly. But the game itself, mechanically pretty simple, little bidding / auction game. Roxley came and turned it into Skyrise. So when I was approached for this, they said, hey, do you have any interest in checking out High Rise? It's a reimagining or built upon Metropolis. I was like, yeah, I'm in. Definitely. Absolutely. I love Metropolis. It has its pluses and minuses. I can say that. Overproduced is the first thing that comes to mind. So first off, the board. The board is a score track around the outside, and then a little place for the little special discs, which this is another thing that got added on to it. That's it. Built upon the board are now these 5 little for us, for the prototype, it was 3D printed, but I'm sure they'll be, hard plastic, whatever it is. Glorified miniature islands that piece together and will vary up how the different where the basically allows you to customize the board. But why do they need to be giant pieces of plastic? And that was a choice. Okay. The buildings I thought we didn't understand it at first when we got the prototype, because in the original they were just numbered, I want to call it like 1 to 14 for every player, and they're in 3 different sizes. They're still in 3 different sizes, and the plastic 3D printed, whatever you want, resin, whatever those are, gorgeous. They are really nice.
Those were really nice.
So if there's one thing that, yes, overproduced, completely unnecessary, but that I fully support and think were great, were those.
Yeah.
They were numbered with weird numbers, all the way from like 1 up to 124 maybe. But then we realized that they're in buckets of 10s, and then every player they're basically tiebreakers. So if I have number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, then somebody else might have number 11, then 12, 13, 14. So there's 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s for the tiebreaker for that bucket. That was a really smart improvement. I thought that was really, really well done.
Yes.
And then they added on more stuff. And they made like some of the hidden objective stuff for the different colors. It becomes really, really obvious and you're always going to get. It felt completely extraneous in that regard. Then the special, I forget what they're called, but they're the like palace or monument or whatever. Mm-hmm. The rule breaker on that's fine. We only played it a couple of times, so I don't want to speak to balance in that regard, but they felt swingy in that regard. There seemed to be a wide range, but I'm going to go ahead and give Roxley the benefit of doubt on that stuff, so that's fine. But then they added in the all the various different chits and the hidden chits, the A's, B's, C's, and D's that you look at. Oh, if you get an A, then you can look at what the A value is. And it just felt like one thing layered on top of another thing on top of another thing that was unnecessary. And it just took what was a fundamentally mechanically simple game and just added too many layers to it that it lost a lot of its charm and just turned into an overproduced game that just lost its charm. And that could be me being sentimental. And I know Shrey felt somewhat similar because both he and I had played and were big fans of the original, artwork notwithstanding. And there's a lot of good in Skyrise. And I think there's the ability to take some of those improvements and maybe not play with some of the stuff that's layered on top. You can go back to the original core idea that was Metropolis. But it just felt like just too much was added in, and it wasn't what I was hoping it would be, I guess, and turned into a bit of an overproduction step, especially with the board with the islands.
Yeah, and I just felt it just went on too long. There was just not enough interest in the game to last its distance. And so I wasn't, and I've never played Metropolis, so maybe I would have preferred it. It could well be that style of game, it's much more abstract, much more. I don't know. I felt there was perhaps something fundamental in the game that just doesn't jive with me. But both times I was playing the last hour, I was kind of saying, please let this be over. And of course, when you've got a game that also tends to encourage a bit of AP, then you're really crying for mercy.
And that's not to bag on Skyrise here. It's just, and I think Shrey says it pretty well. There was an option to do to where it's just cardboard pieces on the board. I think I would have preferred that instead of that huge plastic island thing. And I think he summed it up really well here, that the original is great, although maybe it could have used a little bit of development. This took it too far. And I think that sums it up really well as far as my feelings on that. And I realize that we're talking about this a fair bit, or at least I am, but I think this falls in the category of you took a game that I really, really liked, and then you went and did too much with it, and I'm taking that personal. I know it's not personal, Gavin. I know that. It's just it just hit me a little bit because it's the opposite of Carnegie for me, to where I came in like Carnegie had been talked up by folks around us for like the better part of 2.5 years. And I was like, okay, enough. Like, it's not going to be, oh, wow, this actually, yeah, that kind of lived up to what you said it would be. This, I had really high expectations of it because, oh, you're building upon a game I really like. And then I was like, oh, you did too much with it, I think. And damn it. But I think you can take some of those things off and not play with them if you're me and you wish to do so. So if so, then I guess win-win in that regard. So, yeah, there we go. All right. Anyway, so enough about that. And the last thing that since it's been a minute since we've done the podcast, we have a little award that we started up some number of years ago called the Golden Elephant Award that much due to the pandemic, honestly, went on hiatus for a couple of years. And so the Golden Elephant Award is going to be coming back. It'll be in the fall for 2020, and it will be around the new year for, check that. Yes, I got the years right. It'll be in the fall, announced the winner of 2020. Around the new year, the announcement for the winner for 2021. And then, provided things get back to normal, then it'll be HeavyCon, which is Memorial Day weekend for 2022. All right, so there's
ambitious. I like it, though.
Yeah, but, well, it's the reason I made these decisions on this because I actually went and I made a list of what games theoretically could be 2020 Golden Elephant Award finalists, even if not winners, right? And I don't know. I put like 30 games on the list here because it's not all up to Edward. It's, there's a group of us. And looking at this, first off, how the hell is Dune Imperium ranked that high? Come on, people. It's not that damn good a game.
I'll agree with that one. I was not a fan of Dune
Take
Imperium.
the name off. Take the theme and the name off that, and that's just a game on a pile of it. Come on, man. All right, needed to get that off my chest.
Plus
right.
one on that one.
So, but like games that look, they're probably not going to win. They might win, but like, okay, I threw Dune Imperium on here, both to remind me for that little bit, but it's ranked high, but whatever. On Mars, Beyond the Sun, Imperial Struggle, Praga is on here. I threw Anno 1800. And other people can come up with their own, like suggestions from within our group or anybody out there listening. Feel free to shoot out suggestions on games that you think could be. Can't be reprints, can't be expansions, and it has to have been published in 2020, right? But you look at this like maybe The Cost or Tokyo Tsushigi Market, This War Without an Enemy. But there 18 Chesapeake. But there are still a number of these games that we haven't played. Versailles 1919. Cosmic Frog. I put Cloudage on here or Merv. But then when I'm making this list, and I do this every time I do this, you brought up something before we started recording. You looking at the go ahead, tell folks.
Yeah, well, I mean, I will say, when I think of the Golden Elephant, I think of its recent award winners. I think of Pax Pamir Second Edition. I think of Brass Birmingham. I think of Lisboa. Wonderful games. I have not played a heavy game that's been out in the last couple of years that I feel is worthy to sit on a shelf next to those three. And maybe that there are games that I haven't played that could sit. I haven't played Praga. I would love to play The Cost because I'm fascinated by its theme and the way it tackled its theme. So I'm sure there could well be games that go on there. I just haven't played them. And we have played a reasonable amount of games, but the interesting thing is I compare it to 2019, and I think of 2019, Pax Pamir Second Edition was the winner. But also on the list was City of the Big Shoulders, Pipeline, and Barrage. all of which are better than any game I've played that's come out since of that kind of weight.
So Martin asked me, do we have to give out an award for the? And I was like, stop with that. But no, I think it's actually a valid question. And this has been posed in the past. Are there years that we just don't give out an award because there isn't something worthy? I don't think that much of myself or of our award that we can deem that. Like, that is a level of elitist and I am not prepared to go to. No. The answer is a hard no. We will not be skipping a year because of that. But yeah, and there are others, right? There's Dual Gauge, there's The Vote, there's Rolling Stock Stars, although is that a reprint? And we have to discuss that, whatever. This War Without an Enemy, whatever, Verdun 1916. So there's a number of games we just haven't played yet. But yeah, that's the interesting thing, is everybody that's going to be on this panel this year, and by this year, it's basically for 3 awards, so congrats. It's going to be hard, but like, okay, and I'm going to highlight one just as an example here. Anno 1800. That was a perfectly fine game. I enjoyed my plays of it. Is it those games that you just mentioned?
It's interesting because when I was making that comment, I was thinking I've played some nice, what I'll call more medium weight games that I could imagine getting at some point. Anno 1800, Beyond the Sun, Firearm, but I'm not sure that they're weighty enough to make it onto that shelf. They don't. To me, there's a degree of weight that feels like there's a bit more there that Pax and Lisboa and Brass have.
Okay, so by weight, you don't mean the game's weight. You mean the substance of the game, I think. Question mark?
I think I mean the weight.
Oh, really? Like you think they're too light of games? Like to?
Yeah,
I mean, it's medium and heavy.
Okay, yeah, no, fair. That's fair. I mean, I just think again, I'm kind of thinking of that. If that's my standard that I'm setting up, then to me that implies a kind of weight level that is greater. And then again, if you think of the contenders in 2019 that didn't make it, City of the Big Shoulders, Barrage.
Some year. I mean, let's face it.
It was just interesting. I thought that there was that distinction, which is not a bad thing. I mean, I really enjoyed Anno 1800, Beyond the Sun and Firearm. I could definitely play those more often. I could see they're on my possible buy list. But it is interesting that they are not quite of the weight of those 3 that I mentioned early on.
Some years are better than others. I mean, I think. I mean, obviously it's subjective. Obviously, not only was 2020 a good year or a down year, if you will. That's going to be subjective. There's no definable thing. Like no one person is gospel on that. And all of these awards are subjective. And I'm not going to dictate anybody's own way of choosing how to rate these games in that regard. It's kind of like if you're a baseball fan, like how the Hall of Fame it sends out all the ballots. Some people take it to different degrees of where they put emphasis. And that's kind of like how we're doing it here. But looking at this, 2020, I think, is going to be a really hard year to try and figure out. 2020, I listed a lot of those games, and yeah, we'll see. 2021, okay, in no particular order, right? You have Dominant Species Marine, definitely not a sequel or an expansion or whatever, right? It's its own animal. You have Bitoku, you have Boon Lake, you have Ark Nova, you have Oath, you have Coffee Traders, you have Imperial Steam, and others, but those are all names that people are going to recognize as, oh, I could at least see that in the discussions somewhere in there, right? I feel like I think 2020 is going to be a harder struggle than there have been certain years where it's been pretty obvious, and there have been other years that have been far harder. And I think 2020 is going to be a harder year to figure that out. But I'm excited for the challenge of this. And I'm also glad that it's not just like one or two people anymore. I think that helps. And that helps get it a little bit more well-rounded. So I'm looking forward to, playing more of these games, but also being able to talk about them here on the podcast, but and also getting caught up on that stuff, right? And recovering from the pandemic as best we can.
I think also part of my sourness on this is running into games like, I mean, I have commented a few times around here that my dislike of the way we have these, I refer to them as the T games, because it's that style of Takanu.
Stop picking on board and dice.
And you know, it really came home to me playing Nightmare Cathedral, right? It was again the kind of, there was sort of one really nifty mechanism in the game that was, ooh, you could do something with this. And then a whole load of stuff thrown onto it. Here's a bunch of temple tracks and a bunch of this and a bunch of that and a whole bunch of things thrown in. And, oh, yeah, there was you probably could do something interesting with this theme because the artwork's beautiful, but we're going to completely ignore it. I have no idea what I'm playing, what I'm trying to achieve, or why. And you're just going to go, ugh. And I've had that reaction to so many games of that, where the weight I feel is up there with that shelf, but the qualification, no way. Yep, that's how I felt. There we are.
He's only one voice.
Exactly.
Of this. clearly, not influenced by yours truly. No, and I appreciate, and I think that kind of gets back to why I miss the podcast, is this gives me a little bit more, gives us a little bit more, I don't want to say freedom. It's my damn show. If I want to do stuff on YouTube, I can do stuff on YouTube. However, I think it takes a little bit, allows a little bit more breadth and a little bit more wiggle room for discussing these things, as opposed to during a live stream, sponsored or unsponsored. I mean, obviously sponsored, we try and keep some of the opinions out of it, outside of what we're playing when we're doing that. But even unsponsored, we're focused on playing the game, right? Presenting the game and playing the game, and it's a little bit more structured. Maybe not rigid, but structured. Whereas the podcast, we can be a little bit more free to kind of go in different directions like this and be a little bit more, I mean, we tell the truth on the YouTube channel as well, but I feel like this gives us, there's a word that I'm not able to come up with. It just gives us a little bit more freedom to go and to delve into, I think is what I'm trying to say, and really get to things that you really feel strongly one way or the other, or hits or misses in that regards. And even though we do that in the roundtable discussions on the YouTube channel, I missed it here with the podcast. So, but yeah, so there you go. That's pretty much all we got, I think, for this week.
Yep. That's all I came with.
All right. So thanks to everybody that watched live, but also to everybody listening out there. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode, and we'll leave it at that.
And everybody out there listening, please encourage Edward in every possible way you can think of to do more podcasts, because I want to listen to them. So
feedback. And here's the thing: like, I'm not. Look, your podcast sucks. I don't like that you talk about this or the way you present. Like, give me feedback one way or the other. I would like to hear it. It doesn't all have to be. I'm not looking for. Jesus, I can't think. Good thing I don't talk for a living. Try that again, Craig. I don't want sycophants. I want honest feedback, but I want feedback, because if there's feedback, I'm more encouraged to continue doing this. And I want to do this, but it helps keep the motivation going, because if you're just throwing it out in the ether, you don't really know who's hearing it. At least with the YouTube channel, we get that feedback both in the comments as well as the live viewers and the whole 9 yards and the interaction on Twitter. I don't hear about the podcast, and that really makes it really hard to keep that momentum going because the passion comes from y'all. It helps feed that passion that I have for this. So make it a two-way street, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, please. We want to hear.
All right. How do I want feedback? Carrier pigeon. I don't care. Slack, email, Twitter, any of that. Knock yourself out. I don't care where it is. Just make sure, or less so in the guild, because honestly, the guild on BGG became a very hostile, ugly place. So less so there. But email, Slack, if you're a patron, Twitter, any kind of social media, hit us up. I would love to hear it. So,
yep.
That's it. We'll see y'all in a couple weeks. I'm Edward.
I'm Martin.
Thanks, y'all. All right. So that's a wrap for the podcast. What'd y'all think? For those of y'all watching live, I mean, now we'll interact with y'all.
Yeah.
We've been following some of the conversation as we've gone along, but I figure we'll take a couple minutes here. I saw Shrey answered a bunch of questions in there. Let's see. Another Masters of Venice stream with the mini expansion. I could see that. I turned more of our group onto Masters of Venice. Civ New Dawn. Thank you, Shrey. Yeah, I missed that, but yes, that was it. Yeah. So, curious. I mean, obviously, there's a number of y'all watching live here. Is this something you want to see continue as far as the live recordings like this? Or would you rather just because guess what? If you're here live, you're going to hear the same thing, but a little bit more edited, more music on the podcast. So you heard it. Go and download it still. Listen to it because numbers. I'd appreciate that. But also, give us feedback on whether or not you want this live thing because obviously we're not interacting with y'all a lot because we're focusing. This is for the podcast, and y'all get bonus stuff is basically how that comes out. So, yeah. Let's see. Will doing podcasts on Patreon offer more freedom for opinions since it stays with us? Like patron-only ones? I guess I hadn't considered that. I don't know that we pull any punches. Like, here's the thing. Skyrise was a sponsored stream. Right. I don't think we really pulled any punches. Like, and I think we were fair, honest, and thorough and balanced, right? On that. Like, look, highlighted that I think it's overproduced and they took it to a degree that I didn't want them to, but also can highlight the positives on it. So I don't know that there is a whole lot of value of putting it behind a paywall in a sense that, I can say what I guess theoretically I could cuss more, which I tend to do on Glory to Rome stream type stuff. But outside of that, the podcast itself, the fact that this is going to go out for the masses, I have no problems saying this because the sponsored streams, a lot of the folks I'm going to start doing this, give our opinions in Slack.
Yep.
I have no problem with anybody that was on the stream for a sponsored stream, myself included, giving their honest opinions off that stream. We don't do it on the stream because sponsored and, appearance of bias and the whole 9 yards. So we chose, that was a universal decision that was made by our group, and I stand by it, and that's not going to change. But outside of that one stream, that's what the sponsorship or the sponsored live streams are for. They are paying for us to teach and play the game here. Yep. Outside of that, we can say whatever the hell we want. It's still going to be measured in a sense that this is somebody's baby. Don't call somebody's baby ugly. You know what I mean? You can, again, I'm kind of picking on Skyrise, but I'm just using that as an example that, look, I think we highlighted some real good positives about it, and we highlighted things that we weren't super keen on. That is fair, honest, balanced, not calling somebody's baby ugly, just saying, no, I don't think they should have done these things. I don't like this. So putting it behind a wall in that regard isn't going to get something that you're not already getting. You're
And
just not going to get those on the live stream
and as you
itself.
say, you get the Slack discussion. And I mean, I make a point of posting to Slack regularly when I play, both games here and anywhere else I'm likely to play a game. And I think that's the best place to discuss it, because then you can have a real discussion and really get a lot of people in because you're on Slack. So I think for the Patreon paywall stuff, the Slack is definitely the way to do it for me.
All right. On the golden elephant topic, you think there's been any lull in heavy games when COVID hit? Yeah, 2020. I mean, 2020 seems down, right? Like I'm looking at the list and I'm like,
But you would think that would be the COVID would be affecting later, not because I mean everything's kind of lined up for 2020, right? So it would. I don't know, but
yeah, I don't think that is a COVID. I think just 2020 wasn't a banner year for heavier games. The end. And not every game can be as good as like 2019 was.
Yeah.
Or there have been others. I mean, 2021 seems pretty good, right? Oath, Arc Nova, Coffee Traders, Imperial Steam, Bitoku I have on here. I haven't played Maglev Metro. There's Dominant Species Marine. And there were others I put down. I mean, Pax Viking, Seize the Bean. Put soldiers in postmen's uniforms. So, yeah, I don't think it's a COVID-related thing. I think it's completely extraneous to that. With the advent of Tabletopia and Board Game Arena, whatever, I think being able to get playtesting done for these bigger games, whether it's COVID or otherwise, you don't need face-to-face playtesting as much anymore. And so I think unrelated. So no, I don't think those are related in any way, shape, or form. Let's see. I really need to try Spirit Island. Okay.
yeah, the comment about the Patreon only streams that occurred to me at the time when we're trying to look at getting enough plays in to do an in-depth review. That's a way of doing it, because then you've got because we did that with Imperial Steam, right? We did a Patreon only stream when we were setting up before we did the official stream, as it were, and I thought that was kind of a good, decent way of doing it.
Oh, and those will come back. Like right? They haven't gone anywhere. Same with the cooking stuff. Hasn't gone anywhere. Just things have just kind of vacations for people and just health issues for various people. So all of those things are still going to happen, but having the pre-plays like patron only, that's still going to happen. Undefined says still prefer Ask the Elephants. Those are going to be around. Those are still going to happen. But there's some really ugly babies. There's some really bad games. That's a fair point. But still, I have a responsibility on this show to be respectful of both sides, and both y'all as viewers, listeners, and whatnot, the community as at large. But I also have a responsibility to be respectful of the publisher, designer, developer, and all that. And I think I have found a very good line in which, like a lane that I stay in, that, look, I can say this game is not great without calling it just absolute crap and saying nothing positive about it. I can convey that to y'all without code words, or like I can just, I think I have a solid enough grasp on the English language that I can convey these ideas to you, as well as anybody else that sits over in this chair can convey these ideas, that the aspects that we really don't like or that we feel didn't live up to their own goals that they clearly set, without being disrespectful, saying something's dumb or bad or stupid or feeling any kind of trigger type word. All right. And yes, the podcast is back.
Yeah, I mean, part of the trick of talking about games is to try and identify the things you like and the things that you don't tend to like, and be able to say, "Oh, I don't like this game, but it has these features that I think other people will appreciate," and that's why I always try to analyze why I'm liking or not liking a game.
And to be clear, so this is one of the things that I need to be careful of. So Alvin says, "Ha, I backed Skyrise after watching your playthrough because it seemed fun, but now sad face." No, that's not. No, I am coming at it from I have Metropolis. In fact, I have 2 copies of Metropolis back there because one of the boxes got crushed back in the day. And if you don't have access to Metropolis, get Skyrise. I think it's good for that. I just don't like some of the stuff they added on. And I think the plastic stuff is overproduced. I do like the development. I like the buildings, the way those worked out. And I both from a production standpoint as well as and giving those bigger numbers. Oh yeah, I like that. I like that. That they're all different asymmetric numbers. I think that was a really clever, really well done idea. I just didn't like some of the stuff they layered on.
And I didn't mention it as we were talking because I didn't think about it, but I also elements of the graphic design I felt made it really hard to see what was going on.
Yeah, I hope they improve some aspects of that. But that said, looking at it like from our side view over here, it looked gorgeous. It was really, really pretty, right? And yes, these are very, very, very good mics, but they are very so if you ever watch like I'm thinking like ESPN radio or any of the other big time like in studio type shows that they have, any of the big they're using these mics. And somehow they're able to talk like this to where they're not eating the mic. I've never learned how to, even with our soundboard over here, I've yet to figure out how they're able to get the sound amazing without eating the mic like we have to, but it sounds really good. These are my babies. I miss using them. I'm glad we have them. So yes. So yeah. Anyway, for Martin, Barrage or Pipeline, and why?
Barrage I like because it has that interactivity of I build something and other people are going to take advantage of it, and I'm looking how to take advantage of other people's, or also do an interesting block. I can divert the water away from some. I think the game had a lot of interesting aspects in that. I only played it twice, and we're talking back at the beginning of 2019, so it was a long time ago. But I remember feeling, I could definitely go for that. Pipeline I only played once. And it's interestingly different because it isn't very interactive. But I kind of liked its puzzle quality, and I felt, occasionally it might be nice to play a more thinky, non-interactive game. I would get Barrage first if I was shopping, but they both struck me as quite interesting games.
I need to play. I've yet to play the published edition of Barrage. I've only played the prototype. I really want to bust that out at some point. I would like to. It's sitting up there. I know. Yeah. So, and there's a discussion going on in chat right now about Demacher. Y'all know I'm a big fan of Uli. I'm a big fan of Spielworks. I did not care for the newest edition of Demacher. I much prefer the 3rd edition of Demacher, which is the one before that. And then we use some mismatch of the 2nd edition, 3rd edition rules. The new edition would be the 4th edition, I guess, technically. The fact that the short game is the default game, that's the wrong way to play it. No, play the long game, or as I call it, the Demacher. But yeah, there are certain aspects of that I wasn't super keen on. So anyway, yeah. So that's it. I have a family trip going up to see family with the kids for the rest of this week. So I am out of here until Monday. What do you got going on this week? Anything? Are you hosting game day?
Actually, I've got to check with Cindy. Probably. I probably will
good.
do.
All right.
But I should double check.
All right.
It's on my list of things to do. I should have asked that.
Hold on. Brianna says, I miss the group doing more crunchy Euros back in the Lisboa Brides and Bribes for Cocoa days. hold on one second. I'm going to take umbrage with this. Not picking on you, Brianna. Just hold on. Just gonna point out and refresh y'all's memory on this. So, in the last couple of months, okay, we've done more Age of Steam than you can count. We've done Oath. We've done Power Grid. Did Nemo's War. I'm just going backwards looking at this. I would put Carnegie on par with a Rococo for sure. Oh, we did Struggle of Empires behind the scenes, but we didn't do it public yet. But that's coming.
Lots and lots of Age of Steam while I was away.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Batoku is heavy as those. Oh, we haven't done Pampero yet. That's going to be coming in October, but y'all will see a behind-the-scenes stream of it. Pampero is. Arc Nova is up there.
And you didn't call it Terraforming Zoos at any point during the podcast?
No, but it was in the outro video. By the way, have y'all ever noticed Rob does an amazing job on the graphics that he does for the show? But if you ever watch the outro graphic, the end, he always puts a quote up there that it's really kind of clever. And so if you missed that Easter egg, don't. We did Three Kingdoms Redux, Seize the Bean, which okay, that was lighter. More Arc Nova, more Oath. Like Crystal Palace, come on. Just saying. I'm defensive of the content that way. No. All right, all kidding aside, yes, you know I'm just messing with you, Brianna. But my point is, I think we do a pretty good balance. Now, I do think there definitely needs to be more war games. I have kind of gotten out of that. I need to do a better job of bringing more war games on. That definitely is going to be a concerted thing that I'm going to be focusing on. I would like a couple more 18XX sprinkled in here or there, but outside that, I'm happy with the distribution. But honest question, do y'all feel like there haven't been a lot of heavy games, even with those that I've listed? Like, well, if so, where are we missing the mark? Like, what specific games? Because I feel like we're hitting that really well. But if I'm not, this is the kind of feedback I would love to have. So, and you don't have to say it live. You can post that in the comments. But I think that's an important, and that's that right there. This near immediate feedback helps shape the YouTube channel to a degree. I still end up between myself and the folks local here. We all obviously we take that input in and choose to take it as feedback or not, but it's all taken under advisement. But I feel like we're doing a pretty good job of that.
And throw suggestions into the Slack as well. The Slack's
yes,
a good way to
God, yes. I mean, there are times to where we're like, what are we going to do? And then we sit here and we try and figure out what are we going to play and stream. So if y'all have input, this be good times to do it. Okay? All right. Cool. All right. Good. That said, thanks everybody for watching. This was fun.
Yes.
Legitimately fun. So
yeah.
thank you. And I guess see y'all next week, stream-wise. Oh, by the way, just a reminder, a week from tomorrow, Cole Worley's going to be here for John Company 2nd edition. Excited for that. Unfortunately, he only has one copy of his advanced copy, so he's bringing it with him. So what that means is Cole's going to be teaching it live on stream to 3 of us here, and we're going to play it cold. I've played John Company, but it's been a minute. So I'm not sure who all is going to be on that stream. I'm going to leave it up to the group to figure that out. But, yeah, look for that. I think we've locked down next Thursday. Maybe a little bit of subject change. So early spoiler or early teaser on that. All right? Good? You got anything else?
Nope, I'm done.
All right. Y'all have a good night. Thanks, everybody. Go ahead. Thumbs.
Thumbs. Give us thumbs.
He's
I
tired.
got the energy.
All right. Y'all have a good night. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. It's good to have the podcast back. Oh, my God. Look at what I did. Don't look at that. Everybody, run away. Don't look at that. I have failed. You didn't see that. Go away. There we go. All right. I missed that. My bad. That was my fault, not Rob's. Bye, y'all.